She's mentally unstable. She can't even hold a job. Marla's voice didn't shake. It rang out like a line she had rehearsed. No emotion, no hesitation, just confidence polished and weaponized. I sat 2 rows behind her in the courtroom, my back straight, my hands folded. I didn't blink, but inside something shifted, cold and sharp like a crack opening through ice. Ian sat beside her. My son, my only child. He stared straight ahead at the judge's jaw tight, as if willing the floor to swallow him. He didn't nod along, but he didn't interrupt either. He didn't stop her. Your Honor, Marla continued. Octavia has never held a steady job. She disappears for days at a time. She won't even tell us what she does for a living. It's a danger to Tyler's emotional well-being. I kept my eyes on the bench, not on her, not on him. But I saw the way the attorney on their side leaned in, the way a few murmurs stirred in the gallery. They had prepared for this. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a takedown. And Ian, he just let it happen. I heard him call her mom last week when they picked up Tyler from my apartment. The casual, easy way he said it. Marla Mom made those ginger cookies Tyler likes. Like we were still a family. Like it wasn't already in motion. They had already filed the paperwork by then. I suppose they didn't expect me to fight. Didn't think I'd show up in court at all. And if I did, they were ready to paint me as irrelevant, unemployed, unwell. It wasn't the first time people underestimated me. I'd made a career out of being underestimated. The judge didn't look at me. She scribbled something into her notes as Marla spoke about stability, about school routines, about real parenting. Ian kept his mouth shut. The gallery was quiet. Even Tyler didn't look back at me. I let my eyes settle on the envelope in my bag. Still sealed. Still waiting. I didn't come here to beg. I came to wait for the right moment. And it wasn't far off. I learned early that power makes people uncomfortable. It shifts the room, draws eyes that don't know what they're looking for. So I made a choice, let them look past me. At work, I was addressed as Justice Marin. In chambers and courtrooms at conferences, my words could shift rulings, close cases, move policy. But when I left the courthouse, I hung that name on the back of my office door like a coat. At home, I was just Octavia, just Mom. Later, just Nana. I didn't keep it a secret out of shame. I did it because I wanted to be seen without the title. I didn't want Tyler to grow up with the weight of it. I didn't want Ian to feel like he had to earn my approval twice. And I didn't want Marla even then to twist my work into something transactional. So I wore soft cardigans, took off my courtroom shoes at the door. I brought store-brand cookies to birthday parties, and I left before the photos. When Marla posted pictures online, I was usually the blurry figure in the background, reaching for coffee, cleaning something, walking away. And now, in this courtroom, that version of me was being used as evidence. She's secretive, Marla had said. Won't explain what she does. It's unstable at best. Of course I wouldn't explain. I was reviewing sealed appellate cases when she was complaining about the school pickup schedule. I was on calls with child protection boards while she was rescheduling spa appointments. What would have been the point? But now I could see the consequence. My silence, once protective, now looked suspicious, even dangerous. Ian didn't recognize me anymore because I'd made it easy for him not to. He forgot the woman who picked up night shifts when he got sick, who drove 3 hours to find the only specialist that would see him after a playground accident. He forgot the hands that held his college application papers while filing motions on a murder case. He forgot because I let him. The courtroom had gone quiet. Their lawyer stood ready to deliver more. I reached down, touched the edge of the envelope again, and waited for the next blow. After Ellis died, I didn't fall apart. I didn't have time. Ian was 12. Grief hit him like a fist he didn't know how to throw back. I took night classes while he slept. Clerked by day, studied law by night. I packed lunches, argued with insurance agents, and cried quietly in the laundry room once a week. We never went on vacations, never had the money, and later, never had the time. When he got into college, he said, "I knew you'd figure it out, Mom," as if tuition just solved itself. I never told him how many nights I graded papers for extra cash, or how I gave up health insurance for a year to make it stretch. When he married Marla, I smiled through it, even when she called me sweet but scatterbrained, even when she rolled her eyes at my car, my shoes, the way I wrote checks instead of using apps. I said nothing. I figured they were young, they'd mature, they'd see me eventually. But they didn't. And now Marla stood in court with every intention of erasing me, and Ian, my Ian, was helping her do it. She told the court I was evasive, that I refused to disclose my job, that Tyler needed structure, not someone who disappears for work that may not even be real. It took everything in me not to speak then. I could have ended it with one sentence. I could have stood and told them I was a sitting Supreme Court justice, that I preside over some of the most sensitive cases in the state, that the only reason I disappear is because I'm saving children from people far more dangerous than I ever imagined my own son would become. But I didn't, because timing matters. And truth means nothing if delivered too early to people who aren't ready to hear it. So I sat and watched them build their story piece by piece, confident no one would stop them. They believed their version of me. I let them. Because when I finally opened that envelope, I wanted no one left in doubt. She disappears for days, Marla says, her tone expertly calibrated, not angry, not bitter, just concerned. She won't tell us where she works. There's no stable income, no retirement plan, no proof of anything. We don't even know if she has a job at all. I sit still. I don't react. That's what they expect me to do. Crack, protest, get emotional. I don't give them that. I glance at the judge. She's taking notes, her face unreadable. I've known that look for years. It's not dismissal, it's calculation. The gallery shifts again. A few murmurs, some nods. I don't need to turn around to feel the room leaning away from me. A woman with no clear job, no income, no explanation for where she goes. Marla's painting a picture they want to believe. And Ian, my own son, doesn't say a word. He could have stopped it with one sentence. She's always been there for us. Or she paid for our wedding. Or even, she's never asked us for anything. But he stays silent, staring straight ahead, as if he's afraid that defending me will unravel whatever script Marla wrote for him. A younger me might have stood then, might have snapped, tried to explain everything, my hours, my record, my income. But I didn't come here to explain. I came to end this. I reach into my bag and let my hand rest on the envelope. Thick cardstock. The kind reserved for state-embossed seals and formal proceedings. It's been untouched since I placed it there this morning. They think I'm here to prove my worth. I'm not. I'm here to show them they never understood the ground they're standing on. Because for years I've worked beside judges who wouldn't take a single step without checking my opinion first. I've written rulings that change the way children are protected in this state. I've been the reason families were kept together or safely torn apart. But to Marla, I'm just the woman who brings Tyler to school in an old sweater. And to Ian, maybe nothing at all. That's about to change. I stood slowly. The room barely noticed. They were still fixed on Marla's closing remarks, the way she lingered on the phrase emotional instability, like it was a diagnosis she'd been forced to deliver. Your Honor? I said, my voice even the defense would like to call a witness. Their lawyer scoffed. Your Honor, no additional witnesses were disclosed. He became available this morning, I replied, but I believe his testimony is relevant. A pause, then a nod from the bench. Proceed. I walked to the double doors at the rear of the courtroom and opened them. In stepped Chief Justice Raymond Halden. The oxygen left the room. No introduction was needed. The attorneys stiffened. Two clerks whispered something and immediately fell silent. A few reporters in the back raised their phones, then slowly lowered them, too stunned to record. The same man whose signature closes constitutional reviews and final appeals. The one who rarely speaks outside the Capitol building, let alone steps into a county courtroom. He took the witness stand. "Please state your name and position for the record," I said. "Raymond Halden, Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. And do you recognize me?" "Yes," he said, turning slightly to face the room. "You are Justice Octavia Marin, Associate Justice of the State Supreme Court. 8 years on the bench, Chair of the Judicial Ethics Board, author of multiple landmark rulings regarding child welfare and appellate review." The silence was sharp. I watched Marla's smile falter, her posture crack. Ian's head turned toward me as if he were seeing something that didn't fit inside the shape of his memory. I continued. "Has my conduct ever been questioned by the board?" "No," he said simply. "Your record is exemplary. Your legal opinions are frequently cited by federal courts. You're considered a model of impartiality and legal discipline." I glanced at the judge. She had stopped writing. Marla's attorney was pale now, flipping papers without purpose. And Ian, he didn't look confused. He looked betrayed. But not by me. By the version of me he'd agreed to believe. I turned back to the bench. We weren't finished yet. I didn't look at Marla. I didn't need to. Her silence was louder now than any of her arguments. The Chief Justice spoke with the precision of a man used to being quoted. "Justice Marin earns $198,000 annually. Her financial disclosures are on public record. She owns her residence outright as well as a secondary property used for judicial retreats and sabbaticals. No liens, no dependents, no financial instability of any kind." The lawyer who'd stood so confidently just an hour ago now sat rigid, blinking hard at his yellow legal pad as if it might rewrite itself. I let the facts land where they would. "Not as defense, just as truth. She's also responsible," the Chief Justice added, "for writing precedent that has shaped statewide custody law. Her legal philosophy has been cited in federal appeals. She was recently nominated to the National Judicial Ethics Advisory Panel." Still, I said nothing. I wanted the silence to stretch. Ian looked at me then. Really looked. His mouth parted slightly, but no words came. Maybe he was trying to calculate how many birthdays I'd missed because I was reviewing case law, or how many times I said maybe next time because I was in chambers drafting opinions that protected other people's children. Marla was rigid in her chair. The confidence had drained from her posture, leaving only shock. And under that, disbelief. They had underestimated me, and they had done it so completely, so carelessly, that the truth now looked like betrayal. But it wasn't betrayal. It was restraint, the kind they never earned, but I gave anyway. I walked back to the table slowly. I could feel the shift in the room. The gallery had gone still. Even the judge had stopped writing. For years I had let them believe the smaller version of me, because I thought it would keep the peace. Now as I looked over at Tyler, his wide eyes locked on mine, I realized what peace had cost. The judge turned toward me again, no longer impassive. "Justice Marin," she said carefully, "would you care to respond to the earlier allegations?" I stood, and finally let my voice fill the room. I stood, not as Justice Marin, not as the woman in the sealed financial documents, but as the mother they had buried beneath their assumptions. "I never told you what I did," I said calmly, because I didn't want Tyler growing up under a name that wasn't his to carry. I turned to Ian, holding his gaze this time. I didn't want him introduced as the judge's grandson. I didn't want his classmates or his teachers seeing me and forgetting who he was. I wanted him to have a normal childhood. Ian didn't speak. but something shifted behind his eyes like he was suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd asked me anything real. "And you?" I said, still looking at him. "You stopped asking. Years ago." Marla leaned forward, voice sharp, trying to salvage ground. "Your Honor, this doesn't erase her record. She missed school plays, canceled pickups, disappeared without notice. I was in court," I said flatly, "arguing for the removal of a child from a home where his ribs were broken and his mother lied about it. I was drafting an opinion that prevented a man who trafficked his niece from gaining visitation rights. I was reviewing an emergency stay to keep a 6-year-old from being deported." No one interrupted. "And during those hours, those long hours when I didn't answer your calls, I wasn't absent," I said this time to Marla. "I was doing the kind of work that matters when no one is watching." I let the silence sit. "You called it instability," I continued, voice steady. "You said I was unreliable, evasive, secretive. What I was careful. Careful not to overshadow. Careful not to brag. Careful not to insert myself into their curated life of appearances. But now they had dragged my silence into the courtroom and used it as proof I didn't exist." I turned back to the judge. "This is the first time I've spoken today, because until now, no one in this room deserved the truth." The judge folded her hands. "Then please," she said, "continue." The judge didn't hesitate. "Full custody is granted to Miss Marin," she said, her voice firm. "Supervised visitation for Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell will be required pending completion of a parenting evaluation and co-parenting course." No gasps, no shouting, just the soft scrape of a pen leaving a signature behind. The air in the courtroom changed, not dramatic, just heavy, like something had collapsed under its own weight. Marla leaned back, stunned, silent. Ian looked down at his hands. Neither spoke. Their case didn't unravel, it dissolved. Not because I fought harder, but because the truth, once spoken clearly, didn't leave them anywhere to stand. I didn't smile. I didn't glance their way. I gathered my file, my coat, and turned to the gallery. Tyler stood quickly when I reached him. His hand found mine on instinct. We walked out of that courtroom together without a word between us until we stepped into the quiet hallway. He looked up at me. "You're a judge," he whispered. I nodded. "I am." He was quiet for a beat. Then his voice came again, smaller. "How come you never told me?" "Because I'm your grandma first," I said. "That job means more than all the others." He grinned a little crooked, just like Ian used to when he was that age. I tightened my grip on his hand. Behind us, the door opened. I heard the shuffle of heels and briefcases. I didn't turn around. Let them follow. Let them walk out into the same world they thought they owned, only now knowing better. Outside, the wind had picked up. Tyler's jacket flapped open and I helped him zip it up. He looked up at me again. "Does this mean I can tell people?" "If you want to," I said. "It's your story too." He nodded, serious now. "I think it's cool." I smiled then, not for the win, but for the weight I'd carried finally put down. And as we walked toward the parking lot, I saw the figure waiting near the edge of the steps. Small, tentative, holding an envelope I never asked for. It came in a cream-colored envelope with no return address, but I knew her handwriting. Small, slanted, overly neat. Like someone trying too hard to be calm. Marla never called. Never sent an email. Just the letter. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read whatever version of regret she'd managed to put on paper. Whether it was real or rehearsed, it wouldn't change the fact that she stood in a courtroom and tried to gut me with a smile on her face. She hadn't just lied, she built her case on the assumption that I would stay small, stay silent, and let her win. I placed the envelope in the drawer beside the fridge. The one with expired coupons, old insurance notices, and the manual to a blender I no longer owned. That's where things go when they don't deserve a place in my life but don't warrant a dramatic goodbye. Some people want closure. I've never found it useful. I don't need Marla to understand what she did. I just need her far enough away that I can breathe again. I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter listening to the hum of the dishwasher. The silence in the house didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I flipped open my calendar and scanned the next few weeks. Tyler's science fair had been rescheduled. I circled the date in ink, then underlined it. Twice. He was building something with magnets and LED strips, already practicing how he'd explain it to the judges. I'd promised him I'd be there front row. No exceptions. I closed the calendar, set my cup down, and pulled out a sheet of paper from the drawer. It wasn't for Marla or Ian. It was for the judge. A formal request for a permanent change in custody terms. Supervised visits were temporary, but I'd seen enough to know what needed to be made permanent. I sealed the letter, addressed it, and left it by the door. It was time to stop protecting the people who were ready to ruin me. I used to avoid mirrors, not out of vanity or shame, but because I didn't recognize the version of myself I presented to the world, the one in neutral sweaters, scuffed shoes, and soft expressions. I let that version take over because it was easier to be underestimated than questioned. But now, when I stand in front of the mirror, I see all of it, not just the grandmother, not just the judge, the woman who built a life brick by brick alone, with no blueprint and no applause. The woman who stayed silent, not because she was weak, but because she didn't need the noise. Tyler comes to visit my chambers now. His classmates think it's the coolest thing in the world that his grandma wears robes and makes decisions that shape lives. He asked if he could sit in my chair once. I let him. He tells people what I do without hesitation. He knows now. And I don't correct him when he says it with pride in his voice. I no longer downplay who I am. Not because I want recognition, but because I finally understand what happens when you hide too well. People fill in the blanks for you. And sometimes they write you out completely. Marla and Ian still have their scheduled supervised visits, though the court is leaning toward suspension. I haven't pressed. I haven't retaliated. I've only made my boundaries clear. Ian hasn't spoken to me since the hearing. He sent a message through his lawyer once about rebuilding trust. I left it unanswered. Trust isn't rebuilt with vague promises. It's earned painfully over time, and only if the foundation was ever there to begin with. As for the letter from Marla, it's still in the drawer. I've forgotten it more days than I've remembered it. I start my mornings now, the same way I did before the trial, with coffee silence and my calendar open. The difference is, I no longer erase myself from the page. When I walk into courtrooms now, I don't soften my presence. I don't shrink. Because the woman in the mirror is no longer hiding, and she never will again.